So I invite our first speaker, Dr. Toshimina,
Yes,
Chief
ma'am. Yes.
Assistant Professor, Don Bosco College, Kohima.
Okay.
So, and the title of her paper is Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, a Post-Colonial Discourse. So, Toshimin, you have 10 minutes with you,
Thank you.
and we will have question answers after your session, right?
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I think my voice is audible because we are living in a very far-flung place. Is my voice audible, ma'am? Can you hear me? Is my
Yes,
voice
I can hear you, but your voice is cracking a bit. Can you be more clear?
all right? All right. I'll try my best here because we are living in a very far-flung place. Sometimes the network fluctuates.
Yes, we
So,
do
okay,
understand
all
that.
right, okay. Thank you, ma'am. Respected ma'am, participants, good evening to you. And especially, I'd like to thank the organizer, Cameron Trust India, for giving me this opportunity as well. So without going further, because we are running out of time, my topic for my topic for this presentation is Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, a post-colonial discourse. Please, if you can just be a minute, I'll just go to my PowerPoint presentation. Okay, my paper is on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, a post-colonial discourse. Before we go into my paper, let's try to understand the meaning of post-colonialism. It's an umbrella term which brings with its critical attitude. In fact, in a certain sense, it criticizes the previous period, that is colonialism. And this post-colonialism we divide it into three. It's a latent prefix referring to something coming after something. Colonialism, it's a period of time before post-colonialism. Ism, it's a suffix which underlines its critical attitude. Now, post-colonial theory. This is an area of literary criticism and cultural studies which emerged as a significant development in literary theory since the 1970s. It has come into being as an attitude to the colonial ideologies implicit in European texts about the other. It also explores the tragedies of resistance in European texts about the other. It also explores the independence or the counter discourse in the native text against colonialism. And this post-colonial literature, it succeeds the traditional category of Commonwealth literature or Third World literature. And to be more precise, post-colonial theory looks at colonialism strategies of representation of the natives, the epistemological underpinnings of colonial projects, the writing of colonial histories, the feminization, marginalization, and dehumanization of the native, as well as the psychological effects of colonialism, the role of apparatuses like education, historiography, art, and architecture in the execution of the colonial project, and the transactive or negotiatory structure of post-colonialism. Homi Bhabha, he defines post-colonialism as the form of social criticism that bears to this unequal and uneven processes of representation by which the historical experience of the once colonized third world uh, comes to be framed in the West. Edward Said also analyzes the European construction of the East and the Orient as a discursive field called Orientalism. Here, the knowledge and representation here is, in relation to what side Orientalism, Europe first produces a category designated as the other or the Orient through specific practices of knowledge acquisition and formation. And so the knowledge and representation relies upon a series of binary opposition, all of which treat the natives as the native, dark opposite of Europe, civilized barbaric, white, dark, nature in nature, strong, weak, masculine, effeminate, rational, emotional, and progressive and primitive. Here, the first term signifies the European, and the second, which stands for all the equalities rejected as inferior or even dead by the West, always applies to the native. So this knowledge graded as an authentic study for material practices such as racial discrimination, political control, and economic exploitation. And Said's argument thus adds to a whole new dimension to the aphorism. What he said is that knowledge in power. Here, knowledge is colonialization. Now, in order to bring more about the study of post-colonialism, let's try to study the term of hybridity as well. It's an important concept in post-colonial theory, which refers to the integration or mingling of cultural science and practices from the colonizing and colonized culture. It is the belief that the people in their names, unity, capacity, and heritage as well. So it is very important that hybridization makes the colonizing and colonized cultures wanted to identify themselves with others, people, language, in culture. So on the basis of all these issues and assumptions, and we try to understand what post-colonial really is. A further further discussion, a discourse on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness will bring into focus what post-colonial is all about. Here, the Heart of Darkness, it's a novella by Joseph Conrad. It's narrated about a voyage up the Congo River into the Congo Free State in the heart of Africa. Charles Marlowe, the narrator, tells his story to friends abroad, a port anchored and on the river Thames. So, Heart of Darkness is one of the most powerful indictments of colonialism ever written. A subject most topical and great significance to all civilized people. It also explores the exploitation of the black by the white, the primordial human condition, and the mind's proclivities towards self-aggrandizement and excesses. Above all, its aim is to suggest the horrifying possibilities of the great past of man's mind, where doubt itself is lost in an unexplored universe of incertitude. Conrad here shows how some situations were forced man to uncivilized states, where centuries of social and cultural achievements are lost in a quiet blackness of the mind. So the very atmosphere in which the action of this novel takes place is one of darkness, darkness that lies deep in human minds and dictates our noble intentions and of skein of judgment. The theme of this novel itself is colonialism, which could take the form of human exploitation on a devastating scale and the unhealthy influence caused by native surroundings on the mind of the civilized Europeans. So the newly discovered state of Congo promised on him under the cover of which he freely indulged in rapacity, blunder, and exploitation. This abysmal great engulfed all his humanitarian feelings. So, to Marlowe, the narrator, all colonized experience becomes one whole experience. The human exploitation which imperialism in Africa entailed reminds him of the conquest of Britain by the Romans, hungers for gold or pursuers of fame. So the very keynote of imperialism is stuck at the very outset of Marlowe's narration. And what he said here is that, I quote, he grabbed what he could. It was just robbery with violence, aggravated murder on a large scale, looked up into too much. So Marlowe's impression of colonialism falls into three classes here. The first is a direct, straightforward effect on the Roman colonization. The second is ironic and is well illustrated by his reference to the noble cause. Here, in Heart of Darkness is an attack of the ethnicity and the stereo values of Western culture and a restoration of the whole man Kurds, Mr. Kurds. So there is no doubt Kurds began as an emissary of science and progress, imbued with the ideals of love and philanthropy. But the explanation was that it went on to uncover the product under the cover of brotherhood. He came to Africa, wanted to campaign for them, but when he reaches Africa and finds them in a state of absolute freedom, something goes wrong with him. He shakes himself free from all restraints and becomes a law in himself. The third and most important type of comments uses metaphor to lash out against colonialism. Thus, Brussels is likened to a white sepulchre. Here, the title of the novel on one level indicates merely the geographical location of the Belgian Congo and the color of its inhabitants. On another level, it refers to the evil practices of the colonizers of the Congo. Their sordid exploitation of the natives suggests that the real darkness is not in Africa but in Europe, and that its heart is not in the breast of black Africans but in all whites whose continents are engaged in colonialistic enterprises. While in the price, when we read the first part, we at the beginning, we find Marlowe is an upholder of English colonialism, calling the English, I quote, bearers of a spark from the sacred fire. At the end, he realizes that the Thames heads into the heart of an immense darkness. Meaning, here the English colonizers are evil as any other. And those who set forth on colonial enterprises, no matter how nobly they were conceived, lost themselves in the process. So, this seems that the narrator himself is also a true critic of colonialism. In Heart of Darkness, it is the European traders come explorer that Conrad shifts squarely the burden of responsibility. They did the greatest harm to the natives by destroying the primitive order of society, without replacing it by an alternative one. However, the antagonism in the novel springs more from the urgency to make a strong point against colonial parodies rather than against any prejudice against African people endemic in the world. In the final analysis, Conrad's with achievements lies in writing a novel which may not have been represented Africans realistically, but which nevertheless remains profoundly a radical critic of the imperialistic adventures. So, I want to conclude by saying that Heart of Darkness, it becomes an important text in the post-colonial canon. Many of the characteristics of post-colonial theory can be found in this text. In the Folklore study discourse, it is depicted that exploitation of the native by the colonizer is one of the constituent part of the post-colonial experience in this novel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear. Uh, uh, I really appreciate your efforts, and however, what I feel that a new perspective can be analyzed with the same, because nowadays with the recent trends you could have looked at it from a much different perspective too. What I feel is that it's little common one. So maybe for the next time you can try it. But really good. I appreciate your efforts. Thank you. I don't find any question in the chat box, so I think we'll continue. Please stay with us. Maybe later on we'll have more questions. So moving on, we have with us Mrs. Sangeeta Das.
Yes, ma'am, I'm present.
Yes. Sangeeta, can you please introduce yourself and your title also of the presentation?
First of all, a very good evening to my honorable chairperson and all other participants in the call. And my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers for giving me an opportunity to present a paper in their conference. And I am Sangeeta Das from West Bengal. I am an assistant professor with 5 years of teaching experience in a government affiliated college called Indus Mahavidyalaya. So today the paper for my presentation is titled Folk Tales and Indian Women. A vast country with a rich cultural heritage, India most certainly prides itself on a very big and varied repertoire of folk tales. And these tales help to sustain the tradition, the custom, and the languages from different regions, religions, and social groups and tribes. It is quite a known and acceptable fact that mythology, folk tales, and fairy tales are influenced and dominated by male ideology, just as it is found in mainstream literature, and all of these are actually a reenactment of reality. Now, this can create a gender bias amongst the early readers since literature and arts, and especially the folk tales, are much more fundamental in shaping the orientation of young minds more than the scholarly, social, political, and cultural texts and discourses. This creates an urgent need to scrutinize and reinvent these stories by focusing on either gender neutral themes or on stories told from a woman's perspective with a woman protagonist. To understand the position of women in society, the folk tales offer themselves as a vital medium of expression of folk culture and folk tradition. The established image of an Indian woman in Indian folk tales is that of a subordinate, second class human dominated by male interests and an observer of patriarchal values that have been imposed upon her by the society. But the point of contradiction, it is also in these very tales that we have encountered even the escapist fantasies of women who have attempted to rebel against their oppressors, who have been the active heroines, venturing out to realize their own lives and change rules in their own favor. The realization of self identity is the basic agenda of the feminist attitude. In this short virtual presentation, I would focus on a few women-centered tales from the folktale collections of the eminent folklorist A.K. Ramanujam. And the collections are namely Folk Tales from India, which is the first one. And the second one is A Flowering Tree and Other Oral Tales from India. I have picked up those fairy tales where we have female protagonists, and there is a role reversal as we find that in these tales, the women take charge of situations, act as saviors of the menfolk, and display their superior intelligence. They are, in fact, controlling the entire narrative. The first two tales that I'll be discussing are the first one is Tell It to the Walls, and the second one is A Story and a Song, which has been again adapted into various other dramatic genres. Various other dramatic representations, literary genres. And both the tales are about the silenced women who are naturally indoctrinated to suppress all emotional overflowings as they have no listener either in the family or in the society. In the first story, which is Tell It to the Walls, however, just to mention that in both the tales, eventually we find that the women folk have eventually be given a free flow, an allowance for a free flow of their anguished and suppressed desires and grievances and thoughts. By very interesting and amusing, innovative ways. In the first story, that is Tell It to the Walls, the old woman who has in fact become extremely fat by storing up all her grievances inside her, finally goes to the walls of a dilapidated building and pours out all her anguishes on them. And this brings down, rather collapses the entire walls and the building of the house. And in the second tale, that is a story and the song, similarly, again, the suppressed song and the story of a woman, after feeling suffocated, very amusingly escaped her mouth when she was fast asleep with her mouth open. They have a message. The stories convey how women, when they dare to transcend the limits of their circumscribed roles, typical of the various social constructs of femininity, and particularly in these tales, the adherence was supposed to be to the images of docility and coyness in a woman. And when they actually break those images, they can indeed bring about a revolution, as was symbolized or signified by the collapse of the building. And this actually positively contributes to society, and it also helps in women emancipation. My third story of focus is a story in search of an audience. And this can again be read as a meta story about the suffocation of silenced and suppressed womenfolk in society, silently demanding an audience. And this is also a kind of victimization, because even though there is no palpable and visible form of abuse or exploitation against the women of these stories, the very fact that they were not being allowed to let a free flow of their thoughts or of their creative impulses or of their suppressed anguishes, also, and this is also victimization, and this also tantamounts to an exploitation done by the patriarchy or in a patriarchal system. The next two stories are the clever daughter-in-law and the wife who refused to be beaten. The very titles point towards gender stereotyping of woman, as a daughter-in-law is supposed to be gentle and good and not clever. And a wife becomes the wife when she refuses to be bitten. So that is to be noted. In the first tale, the woman protagonist stands up against a patriarchal mother-in-law, which again reinforces the fact that in a society, it is not just the men folk, but also the women who assist in the perpetuation of the patriarchal ideologies. And in the second tale, the protagonist woman, the woman protagonist, she stands up against the tradition of wife beating, and that is also a fallout of patriarchy. And both these stories and the women celebrate the triumph when women can raise their voices against the injustices meted out to them for being a woman. The final story of discussion in this short virtual presentation is A Flowering Tree, A Woman's Tale, where again the author Ramanujan has explored the ecological concerns and how they are identical to the concerns of woman. The story interrogates the problems which woman and nature face when caught in the throes of exploitation and destruction, indifference and ignorance. It is interesting to note that in women-centered tales, and particularly in the 5 tales that I have detailed in the description, in the presentation, that it is either the mother or the married woman who is brought to focus. This again corroborates the dictum governing patriarchy that a woman's identity is completed by a man, and be it a father before her marriage or a husband later on in her life, and it is as if a single woman is not even worthy of being discussed in life. To conclude, these oral tales of women with alternative views, characterized by the urge to speak and protest, usually counter various social constructs and stereotypes, like the images of passive female victims, conceptions of karma, chastity, a woman's creativity, and the manner in which these are inextricably bound up with her capacity for speech. These type of folk tales, which give independent domain to women where they enjoy certain authority for some time, actually offer themselves as primary documents for analyzing gender issues. These stories are a means for the women to negotiate their gender status in society. The cultural hegemony should validate the circulation of such tales.
Sangeeta, I'm sorry, can you please wind up?
Yes, madam. The cultural hegemony should validate the circulation of such tales where women's representation is not marked by stereotyping, and Ramanujam never let the voice of women in these tales get lost in translation. He asserts that the voice of the women teller should be distinctly heard. Thank you. That was all I had to present in this short time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, dear. Great presentation and new insight and what I feel it was you've really worked hard and come up with a great idea of Ramanujan telling his short stories based on female folklores. Great presentation. I really appreciate your work. Congratulations.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
I don't find any questions, so we'll move ahead. Next presentation is by Stuti Priya. Are you there, Stuti?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So Stuti is working in Central University of Jharkhand, Ranchi. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, one and all present here. I am Stuti, pursuing masters from Central University of Jharkhand. I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this platform and chairperson, professors, and audience for coming to my presentation. Today, I would like to talk about the partition, and the topic of my paper is the pathetic state of women in the society at the backdrop of partition through Amrita Pritam's novel Pinjar. The Great Split of India and Pakistan in 1947 was an altering incident for the millions who were displaced and forced to migrate. It was a huge mass migration in the world, nearly about 12 million people and 1 million dying in the process. About 75,000 women were thought to have been raped, seized, or murdered during the whole ordeal. The potency of violence and the brutality held at the time of division is often remembered as one of the bloodiest massacres in the history of India. This paper studies the gender by examining the novel Pinjar by Amrita Pritam, which stands as a spectator of the violence during partition. Pinjar is the pain which was set as a story, but the issue that it raises is misery of female at the backdrop of partition to put an unexpected outlook to the partition narratives. It explores how partition's psychological impact was ultimately framed, engaged, and ignored in various discourses. The highlight it highlights the apparent dilemma between acknowledging female agency and placing the blame for cruel violence on perpetrators rather than sufferers. The writers who worked in the area of partition literature, especially in gender study, were impartial in projecting as women as Hindu, Muslim, or Sikh. The novelist Amrita framed the characters, especially women of both the sides, without any favor, whether of India or Pakistan. She depicted the woman who is like a skeleton and rather a dead body or carcass with no feelings and emotions. Pinjar a shattering blow to the homogenic patriarchal up where women's body is considered as a site of contest and her fidelity is constantly questioned, thereby subjecting her physical anguish and mental trauma. Pinjar is a story of abduction of Puro by Rashid, whose family has an ancestral dispute with Puro's family. The task of enacting revenge for this family is given to Rashid in order to settle the score. The whole story is a journey of transformation from Puros to Hamida, her loss of identity and agony. Novel is about women's suffering, exploitation, and sacrifices because of their dislocation and abduction during partition. Amrita Pritam travel over the ways in which the destiny of Puro became the fate of thousands of women at the time of partition. She explores how conflict between families, communities, and nations are so often brutally and mindlessly played out the bodies and identities of females. Rashid does not rape Puro. Puro escaped and goes home, but told by her father that now there is no place for her, as now nobody will marry her because she was lost her status. The idea of the virginity of a girl being a sign of the family's honor is what's shown in the novel. Rejection was more torturous than abduction for her. The idea of associating a woman's virginity to a man's honor is something which persists even today, where a rape survivor is blamed for getting raped and is considered as a social outcast. The novel also shows people blaming Puro and her destiny for secretly eloping with Rashid. This reflects the present day scenario where the rare survivors has to be in all the burnt of the violence meted to her. Puro's situation is repeated with Laju, though Puro convinced to help between back Puro helped her between back home. Puro is asked by her brother to choose a new life. She surprises everyone by refusing. She emphasizes everyone that after everything has happened, she is where she belongs. Puro is an incarnation who stands as a backbone. Amrita Pritam tries to reveal the facets of violence against women and her trauma. Novel reflects different dimensions of violence against women on religious, social, and most prominently physical and mental. The title Pinjar is connected with the idea of devouring women and reducing them to mere object of men's pleasure. There is a woman character who was sexually assaulted and become pregnant. She was not a normal woman and not aware about the violence inflicted on her body and a child growing in her womb. Her episode depicts that for some men, woman's body is nothing but a pinjar, which can be used for any desired purpose, while for some it is a matter of honor, for it only an objection. The deep desire for bearing a son, a considered daughter, a burden and revealed through Puro's parents, also them. The song in the movie that Charka Chalati Ma, written by Pritam herself, perfectly captures this tension behind the scenes as the song literally suggests that it is better off for a girl to die than to grow up and become a burden to her family. Women during war and women in many parts of the world who are victims of war in general not only subjected to household violence or violence in other form, but the most complex form of violence they have to go through is psychological. A woman's point of view or female outlook towards any incident could be different from man's observation or man's point of view. The experience for a man and woman is always different as their ways of looking at life and living life in the same society are different. It is due to different set of rules which are imposed on them by society and they have to define their ideologies in their respective boundaries. Women can better portray the psychic mind of women, the feeling of inferiority, a sense of contempt for their own sex. The novel Pinjar shows that the politics of religious conversation and incident of reconversion of child and women during panel. Through the novel, author shows an account of personal experience of partition. The novel also shows the religious identity become a brutal blueprint of nationalism. The novel visualizes the Holocaust of partition. The novel shows the element of abduction, violence, loot, forceful marriage, rape, and murder. Author also shows that female has attractive body, which was always exploited by selfish society. Author shows the feature of selfish and mentally sick society aptly. Pinjar aptly discuss the status of women during partition. It is a reflection of new identity and traumatic time of women life. Narrator powerfully present the account of mixtures of women agency and senseless violation of division. It represents the actual experience of women's life after rape or abduction. It is a voice of polluted issues which shows different form of many women as contemporaries. It is not a creative imagination, but a true historical record of events as they took place during those days. It was a fine example of helpless, miserable women who suffered from the days of partition. It was a portrait of expect of violent boundaries and creation of the two nations that is India and Pakistan. This is all I have, ma'am. Thank you for listening me.
Uh, Thank you, Stuti. A wonderful paper and so true, Amrita Pritam has written it so well. The psychological and the physical condition of women at that time during partition. It was
Yeah,
really
ma'am.
horrifying. I truly agree with you. Thank you so much. Great insight, and
Thank you,
please keep
ma'am.
working towards it. Well done.
Okay.
Moving ahead, we have Payal Sen, and Payal is going to represent the gender representations in short in storybooks, a critical overview. Am I
Yes,
right, Payal?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Okay, a very good evening to all. I would just start sharing my screen. Okay, ma'am, I think my screen is visible.
No, not yet.
Ma'am, is it now?
No. Did you click at present now?
Yes, ma'am. Share your screen. I clicked that.
So after Payal, we have K. Korna Deepa. Is she there? K. Korna?
Yes, ma'am, I'm there.
All right, all right.
Okay, ma'am, is it visible now?
Yes, Payal. That's visible.
Okay, yeah. So I will be presenting my paper on gender representation in storybooks, a critical overview. I will just begin with a short introduction. As we all are aware of the topic of the term representation, cultural theory defines the term representation as the use of one thing to stand in for another in order to transmit meaning, the construction of meaning through the use of signs and concepts. Thus, representation could be either visual, verbal, or oral images, or a narrative. Representation has a crucial role in the understanding of literature. For philosophers like Aristotle and Plato, literature is one form of representation. Representation no longer provides a fixed meaning, as representation depends upon various elements such as a cultural, linguistic, social backgrounds which are subjected to historical changes. Representation can never work in isolation, and therefore it tends to differ in different cultural contexts. From an early period, children's literature and storybooks can be associated with gender discrimination. It is seen that literature always follows the trend of societal values and norms. Therefore, a detailed study of a particular society brings out the values and norms which is shared and exists in a particular society. Deviation in a society actually leads to deviation in literature. Boundarization of roles is not unusual in the literary representation of women. Ideal gender roles are prescribed for both boys and girls in different kinds of books. This fixation of ideal gender roles is immensely problematic, as here we can see that women are being usually attached to gender specific roles. Naveen Menon points out in his article, Historical Survey of Children's Literature, that almost every publisher is looking for material to publish which draws upon this unquestioned resource material, so that Indian epics, ancient rules, classical tales, folk tales, and the Panchatantra form the bulk of the children's literature in India today. So coming to the rationale of the study, literature are a reflection of society. The books we read often depicts the current situation of the present society. Women have a crucial role in literature. Literature tends to portray societal values and also enforces these values. Literature therefore has the potential to recreate and redefine the role of gender. With this being said, one wonders if young people literature portrays gender accurately and how it has an impact on the child's worldview. We often see that young children have a preconceived notion about what occupations are appropriate for males and females, and they tend to select this stereotypical occupation based on gender when they are asked about the future careers. Moreover, through reading of storybooks, the children get socialized regarding the norms and attitudes of a society and how each gender is supposed to behave within the societal framework. Coming to the research question which this paper tries to address is, the storybooks presents a gendered view of the world. So various literature have been reviewed, like Singh points out that sexism in literature can be so insidious that it quietly conditions boys and girls to accept the ways they see and view the world, thus reinforcing gender images. Lucan also believes that children discover themselves but also explore the world through the help of books. She further says that words are not merely words, but words are chosen skillfully and through artistry to give readers the pleasure and help them to understand themselves and others. Gassman is also of the opinion that research and sums up her research with the idea that few female characters in this textual analysis were portrayed as having formal education and were portrayed in a wife or a motherhood role, rarely being portrayed as being in a non-traditional relationship. So this research is based on is descriptive in nature, and the data is gathered in conjunction with available books, journals, and resources. Coming to the objective of this paper, the objectives are as follows: to explore the portrayal of women in storybooks, to analyze the impact of storybooks on the worldview of children, to depict whether any gender bias exists in storybooks. So, gender is a social construct. In most theories, relationship of literature and society, reflection, influence and social control are implied. The concept of empowerment, that is, the way of giving power, is also gender-centric in textbooks. Male-centric ideologies plays an important role here. Certain books are seen as sites for examining the ways in which gender is included and domesticated in a particular text or any storybook. In many instances, storybooks present a gender picture of the world. Both boys and girls are associated with specific gender roles and behavior. Construction of gender in storybooks is purely stereotypical, where we often find women are assumed as fragile, loving, sympathetic, caring, and obedient, while on the other hand, men are assertive, independent, brave, and career focused. This type of gender stereotypes are harmful for society in general, as storybooks are reinforcing these stereotypical notions instead of challenging. The reader of storybooks often range from all age groups. Producers of storybooks also have a role to play, as they often try to portray the conventional picture of gender without questioning the age-old dominant gender stereotypes. As Reynolds rightly claims, stories are key source of the images, vocabularies, attitudes, structures, and explanations, which can be important carrier of information about changes in culture, present, and past. This underrepresentation of women compared to males in storybook, where they are portrayed as the other. Voice identity along with marginalization of women is often an issue of silence. Generally, men are associated with strong voices and established identity. Women in Indian literature are portrayed as submissive because of the inferior position in comparison to male-dominated society. So, storybook has a great impact on one's personality, and the child is not an exception. Storybooks portray gender into a fixed role, and any deviation from such role is not considered as good. Till today, Indian literature there is seen an absence of normal women. Either they are portrayed as superwomen, managing almost everything most efficiently, or they are highlighted in a negative image, similar to those in movies, daily soaps. So, the child, through reading such textbooks or storybooks, forms or develops the notion of what a gender is, and how a male and a female is supposed to behave in a given environment. The child internalizes such thoughts and beliefs, which is quite evident from the play stage where the child plays games which are assigned for different genders and behave in a manner which the gender roles demand. So, the representation of women can be linked with Baudrillard's concept of hyperreality. The aim of this representation is to create a distinction between reality and life of a woman. Till today, Indian literature is unable to escape from this trap of hyperreality for the portrayal of women. The differences in representation is purely ideological. In the sphere of traditional representation, optimum idealization takes place. Coming to the conclusion, the former secretary of IBBY India, Manorama Jaffa, opines that present-day children's literature in India in all languages continues to draw largely upon traditional literature. The non-representation of women and existence of stereotypes in the portrayal of women have been identified as a two key feature of gender bias in storybooks. Though the situation is changing now and more number of textual and pictorial representation promote gender equality, where women and girls are increasingly promoting new pictures. In some instances, many storybooks have adopted a role reversal strategy. Storybooks which were previously primarily located in social domain now want to promote gender equality among its readers. Through storybooks, the author constructs a new world for his reader, so therefore the content should be gender sensitive. So I would like to conclude by saying that storybooks are an important agent of social change. Storybooks are undergoing a revolution as it now tries to capture every intricate details in stories and thereby present a realistic view without being gender biased. Nowadays, the portrayal of women have not only been limited to that of a mother, wife, sister, but women are also associated with different professions which were previously reserved only for men. This boundarization of gender role in the present context to a certain aspects is seen fading away, whereby it is seen that storybooks is trying to present a gender neutral view of the world. Okay. So I'd like to conclude by saying this. That's all I had for today.
Thank you so much, Payal. Wonderful presentation indeed. And your presentation was very descriptive and qualitative in nature. I really liked it. And yes, very true. You've given a very thoughtful insight that storybooks do build up a psyche of men and women, because all of us have read storybooks in our childhood, and we just love reading that in our own languages, in our whether it be English or any local language also. It was always an interesting sight, and that's true. We build up psychology just reading those storybooks, and now we need to change a role reverse strategy should be planned, so that there can be a change in the psychology of the readers from starting only, from our childhood only. So well done, great presentation.
Thank you,
Is there
ma'am.
any question? No, I don't find any question. So I think I'll move on. Wonderful. Thank you. And
One query, ma'am. One query to
yes,
Python.
yes. So Roshan ma'am has a query.
Yes,
Uh,
ma'am.
as you said in the conclusion that there is a realistic view, and the story tells the real stories or the pictorial image of the society. Don't you think that there is a representation in the story as well? As it depends on the author's perspective. Sometimes they represent women, sometimes they represent a particular subject, or it depends on his or her author's idea how they have to pick, how they have to create an image or the discourse or the counter discourse through the through the storybooks or story.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, previously, mostly storybooks were written from the male point of view because before independence in India, mainly men were given the responsibility for writing storybooks, and there were not many publisher available who would publish storybooks written by women. So many emotions, many sentiments which the women feels or usually attached with women, which the male authors are not aware of, is not highlighted in such storybooks, and the male authors usually try to present the stories in their from their point of view. That is a male centric point of view. Though we see that there is deviation, few male authors are also presenting women as a central character, but still there's a long way to go, and this recreation or re-portrayal of women needs to be done so that from a very young age, where the child is being socialized into different through different ages like family, schools, storybooks would also help them to get a gender neutral view of the world. Thank you.
Another query, please.
Yes.
uh, what do you, in the morning session also, the same question we asked to Mr. Rahul Upadhyay about the curriculum and third gender relation. So, what is your opinion if there are in the curriculum, if we suppose we change the curriculum and we add some third gender stories in the curriculum, and we try to gender sensitize through the stories. So
Yes,
how
ma'am.
do you think how it would be the psychological impact to the
Ma'am, regarding the third gender issue, I would like to mention that especially in India, there is a stigma attached with the term third gender. And I don't think this stigma is fading away. There is lots and lots of stigma, and whenever we hear the term third gender, like we like raise our eyebrows, third gender, okay. So definitely, I think in the school curriculum, in the textbooks, one should include the term third gender so that the stigma which is being attached with third gender will be fading away soon and sooner. Though it will take time, but definitely we can start the initiative of including third gender itself in the textbook so that the children are being well aware and the stigma is being vanished or removed with the passing days or passing years to come. Thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Dr. Shubhra, can I make my comment right now?
Yes, 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 please do.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Siham Osama from Egypt, Cairo. I'm very happy to be with you today, and I've noticed that through especially the literary analyses that we have heard today, the focus on Indian literature shows us that women in Indian literature are always depicted as victimized. That reminds me of women depicted in Arabic literature and the Middle Eastern literature in general. But there is an inclination, this uh, uh, going on these days towards creating stories of women who represent the strong, independent hero that is the protagonist, that is the savior of family and savior of society. Just like Western ideas of the all independent women that appear to save the world and save society. I wonder if there is such an interest or such an inclination in Indian literature, an inclination that shows or draws an image of Indian women as more self devised, self independent, saviors of themselves and their society and their family. Is there such an inclination in Indian literature, modern Indian literature? And the question is for you, Dr. Chopra, and for everybody. I mean, are we going to see such themes in Indian literature, or is still the victimized women is the major theme in Indian literature?
Yes, there is a lot of change now. uh, Indian literature is evolving a lot, and people are coming out with lots of ideas. And it's not now Indian females are no longer victimized. Actually, that's my perspective. There are females who are coming. I mean, what I generally feel is nowadays even the men are being victimized. So my point of view is altogether different. Basically, I worked on feminism, but what I feel now, there is a lot of difference, lot of change, and I don't personally feel that they are now victimized. So there is a lot of change regarding it.
And change in the context of the caste as well. As in India, we have a caste system, not a class system. Dalit literature, Dalit women literature is also coming out, and there is subaltern. The Gayatri Spivak's coined the term subaltern. Ranjit Guha also has written 12 volumes on subaltern theory. There are also subaltern under the subaltern, all women comes, all Indian women or marginal or minorities women are coming under subaltern concept. So yes, there are various different issues, like upper class women has are facing different issues, Dalit women are facing different issues, and those have been depicted through the novels, autobiographies. But nowadays, more in literature, autobiographies are in emerging or modern, contributing in large context as a modern or postmodern Indian literature.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jashan and Dr. Everybody. Thank you very much. And I hope to see some analyses of modern literature about such issues in upcoming sessions tomorrow and day after tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seham.
And Dr. Seham, thank you so much for collaborating with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Dr. Rashan.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you, Dr. Shubhra.
Now, moving ahead, we have research scholar K. Korna Deepa. She's from Sri Parakita College for Women, Kottalam, and her topic is Dream Queen of Dreams. Are you there, Deepa?
Yeah, I'm there, ma'am.
Yes. Please introduce yourself.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Sharna Deepa, a research scholar in Sri Parashakti College for Women, Kutralam. Okay. So, before beginning my paper, let me thank the entire team for making me this opportunity. So, I titled the paper as Queen of Dreams, a Simulacrum of Women in Society. So, Queen of Dreams is a novel written by Chitra Banerjee Devakaruni. She is one of the famous women novelists whose novels protagonists are women. Her characters represent most of the women in the society. So this paper shed light on the socialization of the gender roles in her novel Queen of Dreams. Yes, most of her themes are Indian culture, tradition, and societal norms. So as she is settled in America, most of her novel setting is in America. So her traditional women protagonist experience in the host culture is limned in her novels. So now, socialization of the gender roles, generally known as the cultural expectations. So here the term gender, according to her, the term gender refers to the socially constructed roles, norms, behaviors, and attributes and activities that a particular society or region considers appropriate for men and women. So her two characters, mainly her protagonist Raki and her friend Belle, are a typical illustration for these gender roles. So aspects of gender considerably vary from one country to another country, from one society to another society. So protagonist Raki want to be an entrepreneur. So here The gender discrimination begins where in the entire novel, mother of Rocky was not called with her own name. She's always been mentioned as Mrs. Gupta and not with her name given by her parents. So Rocky's mother also wanted to be a dream teller. Her passion was to be a dream teller, and she got educated in the caves of India. But in the due course of her education, she met a man and got in love with him. And then she falls in a dilemma whether to marry him or to pursue her education. According to her passion of being a dream teller, she should never marry a man and should be a true mistress to her passion. So at last, she found a solution to marry a man and married with some restrictions. And even after some months, she was not able to be in a cohesion with him, and she decided to move with her passion and be back to India. And so she worked in a grocery shop and earned some money. But when she decided to leave America, she discovered that she is pregnant, and she was again in a dilemma whether to get educated, whether to follow her passion or to remain with her husband. But she decided to bear the child, and she led a life in contrast. So she says that I found novel and charming how to manage a household, how to please her husband. And it was important for her to please her husband than following her passion. And behavioral and some physical restrictions were imposed upon women that are natural for boys. So women were to confront and nurture their child and their family, whereas men are tested to work outside the house to provide their family. So, and some restrictions were imposed upon women in the name of honor of their family. So they are always expected to do their household works when they are getting married. And a man is expected to be a proper worker when he is getting married. Moreover, here the author focuses the inner desire of a man to be a businesswoman. So here Raki, deciding to be a businesswoman, deciding to be an entrepreneur, she began a chai house in America. And initially she didn't got any support from her parents and not even from her life partner. Her friend Belle, she also didn't get any support from her parents. She was then supported by financially supported by her parents by giving some money which was saved for her marriage. So there is a common tendency of every Indian parents to save money for their son to start a business, to commence a business, and for their daughter to get married and settle in their groom's home. So they didn't initially they didn't even believe that they will be a successful women in their business. So here, Mrs. Gupta, mother of Raki, on the contrary, supported her daughter and supported by babysitting her daughter Jonah. So she, through Mrs. Gupta, the author says that women need something of their own to make them independent. So then Raki initiated her business, initiated her chai house in America, but she faced many struggles. So along with her friend Belle, she started an ethnic style homey neighborhood bakery and coffee house. And she faced in danger of arrival of Java, a Starbucks style competitor. She survived her competitor and she did many things. She even renamed it as a Kurma house. Here, there is a common tendency of authors of literature. They have the predisposition of portraying women as a weak gender in the absence of their male partner. So here, the author introduced her father, and he started to help him, who was not present in the entire novel. And later, her husband volunteered to help her in her work. So he brought some of his friends to support her work. And her father keep on seeking some suggestions, and in order to support and uplift her from her fall. They rejuvenated the chai house, and again she faced a trouble during the catastrophe of fire. It was made in the chai house when America faced the bombing of World Trade Center. The country was shaken with the 1911 attacks. The author used that incident to portray this incident. Because of that attack, minor communities and immigrants were looked down upon. And Raki was one of that. So on the day of bombing, Raki and her father were at home seeing all those news on the TV, but they decided to open their shop, believing that other immigrants would also be terrified in the similar manner. So they again opened the shop, um, but was pelted stones on them, and it was set fire, and she again faced the loss. Finally, she succeeded as a painter because she is an artist as well. She paints her imagination and appreciated by many, and she later succeeded as an artist. So here the author allegorically tried to learn that women can't be a successful entrepreneur or a businesswoman in a society uh, 2 decades ago. So the story was set in the late 20th century, and it was a most common thing during that time. And the next thing is about divorce. In a country like India, divorce is not that easy. People won't respect the women, though it was a mutual decision. So the couple will be given a long time to solve their problems before deciding to divorce. Women are always expected to adjust this man for the sake of their family, since dissolving the marital relationship is a process leading to cancellation of responsibilities and duties in a marriage. So Divakarani herself in an interview said that she made her protagonist Raki as a victim of harassment. So when she was asked why it was like that, she said that he wanted her heroine to stop blaming and to start finding her voice as an artist. She made her character to forgive and exist again. So Raki does learn all of this, and as a stereotypical woman, she exonerated her husband, though he didn't comprehend and unwilling to believe when she delineated her plight. So to conclude, the difference in gender occur because there are certain cultural expectations in men and women in a particular society regarding their roles. So gender inequality is defined by the sociologists as a difference in power, status, and prestige the men and women have in a society or region to which they belong. Women are regarded as ineffective for roles other than household works, and often their opinions are not valued and suppressed or ignored during that time. The author explicated the reality in her novel with the women protagonists of that period. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepa. Great presentation, great
Thank you,
insight
ma'am.
you have taken. And yes, of course, Chitra Banerjee is a leading novelist of our times, and she is doing quite well. And in this Dream of Queens also, you have beauty. Even I have not read it yet, but what I
Oh,
analyze, the character of the Raki is really good and exciting, and the Chai House, as you told,
yes.
yes, it's a great. You have really worked hard for it. That can be seen by the
And
exemplary.
ma'am, surprisingly, she didn't talk about the issues in the gender, and she never talked about the dowry system and all. She has given us a different view for a woman in this novel, so that's why I chose
Yes,
this novel.
yes, that's what is making this novel a different one as compared to
Yes,
others.
ma'am.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Congratulations. I don't
Thank
find
you,
any
ma'am.
questions. And now moving on to the last presentation of this first day international conference, I invite Shrestha Bhardwaj from RS Raj Gandhi University, Andhra Pradesh, and the topic of her presentation is The Life of Kosi, a Voiceless Existence. So are
Very
you
good
there?
evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Shrestha.
Thank you, ma'am. And it's Rajiv Gandhi University, ma'am, Arunachal Pradesh.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
Hello, everyone. A very good evening. I'm Shrestha Bhardwaj, a research scholar from Rajiv Gandhi University, Arunachal Pradesh. The topic of my paper is The Life of Kosi, a Voiceless Existence. I would like to start my presentation by quoting a poem from Suzanne Greenhall, who writes in her essay on growing up, Mama and Miss Anne. Mama, go and buy a toy, Anne. Anne, I can buy a gun. Mama, a gun is not fit for you, Anne. Anne, why is a gun not fit for me? Mama, a gun is fit only for a boy. And may I buy a top? The last line, which is very interesting, no, but Mama, no, but you may buy a mop. So, from the above quoted poem, we see the predestined place for women in the family and as well as the society. She is not fit to take a toy, but is considered fit to take a mop. Now, let me go directly to my topic, which is on Kosi. Existing alone in her thatched hovel, Kosi today survives abandonment. This once beautiful and bold life is today withering, counting her moments to finally succumb to death. This is the deteriorating state of life of Kaushalya, the first wife of famous anthropologist Verrier Elwin. We all know Elwin, who he was, what he did, but we never knew who was Kosi. Elwin married Kosi when she was 13 years old. Although the cultural and racial barriers were prevalent, yet Kosi got married to 37 years old Elvin, which according to him was a love marriage. Ramachandra Guha writes, I quote, so Verrier resorted to what he termed love marriage by capture. He got married under a special marriage act designed for such interreligious and interracial unions, followed by a 4-day gond wedding. But Elvin divorced her suddenly at the age of 21, never to be seen again. He, who chose to remarry, discarded her along with his 2 children to live alone without any further help or assistance. Kosi today faces the wrath of life in poverty and sheer disability. A woman, once a strong lady and a breaker of cultural barriers, is today obliterated from the pages of history. Here I am quoting Kosi. She says, I quote, he suddenly went away and he never came back. It is well known that Elvin devoted his life towards the tribal world. He was always sympathetic and kind towards the tribes he studied, but his treatment towards his wife, who was merely 23 at the time of her divorce, with 2 kids to be looked upon, is to be very questionable. Said that Kosi remained an integral part of Elvin's research on the Gond tribe. She represented that culture, but the history today speaks only about Elvin's contribution and not of Kosi. By marrying a native woman, Elvin acquainted himself with the local customs of love and sex, as well as the physical and psychological state of their well-being. But by marrying Elvin, Kosi, what she did was never talked about. She is now also not talked about. Kosi was denied a voice and kept strictly confined within the space provided by her husband. So, can we consider her as a subaltern? This particular group, whether man or woman, is oppressed and considered voiceless as well. A subaltern is the one on behalf of whom the superior has to provide the voice or speak for. The existence of Kosi was fully dependent on the existence of Verrier Elvin. He gave her the voice of being his wife, and no identity else. The reality of a subaltern woman fails to get proper footage in a language which has no resource to identify the silences of herself. The subordinate groups are either forced to keep silent or to structure their reality in terms of the model of the dominant group. Women, especially the subaltern women, has a different reality and they are forced to encode them in terms of men's reality, the reality of mainstream men. This results in a kind of muting. The muting that we see in Kosi, who suffered her life long, but she never spoke a single word against Elvin. In Can the Subaltern Speak? Spivak says, as an object of colonialist historiography and a subject of insurgency, the ideological construction of gender keeps the male dominant. If, in the context of colonial production, the subaltern has no history and cannot speak, the subaltern as female is even more deeply in shadow. Kosi has barely any history when it comes to her existence. During the initial years of the divorce, Elvin sent an amount of rupees 25 to Kosi in order to maintain the family, but this stopped and later she was forced to leave and nurture her family through indentured labor works. Even the pension started in 1981 when the poet Dom Morris visited War has been stopped for nearly a year. Shocked by this state, of the family, Dom Morris again he appealed to the cultural department of the government to at least provide a pension, which was merely 600 rupees a month, which although it started, it again got stopped after March 2005, shortly before the death of Kosi's first son Vijay. Kosi today awaits death with only some memories of Elwin and a photograph. Her family is today facing the wrath of poverty. Here, I would like to put some questions on Kosi and Elwin as well. Was Kosi a well-planned asset of a project? Was it not necessary to provide her an identity for being a representation of a tribe? Kosi today stands doubly marginalized. First, because of being a woman, and second, of being an Orient. Had she have been a white woman, she would have received her part of recognition as well as her requirements to.
Sorry, Shweta, can you please wind up?
Yes, ma'am. So the right of being Elvin's wife was given to Leela Elvin, who stayed with him till his last breath. But Kosi stayed all alone, left and disabled. So, while concluding, I would like to say the societal structures and hierarchies from time immemorial have looked upon women as some object of a kind of a lack. Denied any separate identity, she is a voiceless being. She is today a subaltern, and Kosi, therefore, is a subaltern and a voiceless existence today. And she is today alive, waiting for her death, disabled physically, culturally, and socially as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shrestha. Really an impressive paper, and you have truly justified how Kosi was doubly marginalized women. What I feel, not even doubly, she was triply marginalized, and how she has been forgotten in the course of time. You've provided a lot of scope for further research too. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am.
Congratulations, and keep
Thank
it up.
you.